Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. We are continuing on with Where the Soul Leads. Today we're going to be doing chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5, Rescue at Camino. Kirishima sat in the classroom, his gaze drifting toward the window where the rest of Class 1A was embarking on the test of courage. He had been assigned to extra lessons, a situation that left him feeling sidelined and restless. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, a telepathic warning that sent a shiver down his spine. Attention all students, the League of Villains has invaded the forest training area. Evacuate at once. Without hesitation, Kirishima bolted from his seat and rushed towards the exit, heart pounding in his chest. He had to find Bakugo. He collided with Vlad King, who stood firm, blocking his path. I need to go, Kirishima urged, his voice tight with urgency. Vlad shook his head. We can't risk sending anyone out alone. Everyone is supposed to come here so we can keep track of you. Bakugo's out there, Kirishima protested. We have to account for everyone first. Vlad's tone was unyielding. Frustrated but understanding, Kirishima reluctantly stayed behind. Minutes later, the news came. Bakugo had been kidnapped. A heavy silence fell over the group. The League of Villains had targeted Bakugo specifically, and now he was gone. Kirishima was climbing onto the evacuation bus, one hand gripping the railing, when something caught his eye at the edge of the tree line. The red dog. It stood tense and still, eyes locked on him, a silent plea in its gaze, urgent and unmistakable. It wasn't with Bakugo anymore. Kirishima didn't know what happened, but the dog must have gotten separated when Bakugo was taken. He paused at the top of the step and met the dog's eye. Hey, he whispered, heart twisting. You coming? He gave a small, beckoning gesture. The dog hesitated, then took off at a quiet run. Kirishima stepped aside to make space as it slipped past him and into the bus aisle, brushing against his leg as it passed. He followed it in, settling in his seat with the dog curled up quietly at his feet. If Bakugo wasn't here, Kirishima would take care of the part of him that was. Kirishima didn't sleep the night they got back. The dorms were quiet, too full of silence and absence. A few kids had injuries, some had burns, a lot had questions, but the one thing no one had was Bakugo. The red dog curled up on the floor beside Kirishima's bed. It hadn't made a sound. It never did. But something about the way it lay, tail still, head on its paws, made Kirishima's chest ache. He didn't know what had happened out there. Not yet. Maybe someone at the hospital could tell him. Maybe Midoriya or Yaoyorozu had seen something. But Bakugo was gone. The League had him, and the dog had come back alone. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Kirishima sat on the edge of his mattress, elbows on knees, staring at the creature that only he could see. You must have gotten separated, he whispered. You tried to follow him, didn't you? The dog lifted its head slowly, looking at him, with something so deeply human in its eyes that it almost hurt to meet its gaze. I'm going to get him back, Kirishima said. His throat was dry. I swear it. The dog didn't wag its tail. It didn't move, but it laid its head against Kirishima's foot and stayed there. Kirishima showed up at the hospital the morning after everything fell apart. He didn't know what he was expecting, maybe answers, maybe just the comfort of seeing his classmates still breathing, but mostly he needed to see Midoriya. Kirishima overheard bits and pieces as he walked through the hospital. The media storm, the blame, the press trying to spin Bakugo's capture into something more, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that Bakugo wasn't here, and the dog hadn't left his side since. Midoriya looked worse than he thought he would, bandages around his arms, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept at all. But his eyes were clear, focused, still fighting. They sat in silence for a while. Words didn't come easy, not with everything still raw and sharp around the edges. But eventually Kirishima leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "We should go after him." Midoriya didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked relieved. "I've been thinking the same thing," he said. When the others showed up, Todoroki, Ida, and Yaoyorozu, the idea was already fully formed in Kirishima's mind. No plans, not yet, just that bone-deep certainty that they couldn't leave Bakugo behind. "If we go right away," he said, eyes locked on Midoriya. "Tonight." Yaoyorozu hesitated. "But we don't know where they've taken him." Kirishima turned to her, more serious than any of them had probably ever seen him. "Didn't you put a tracker on one of them when the League attacked the camp?" She blinked. I did, on one of the Nomu." "Then that's where we start," Kirishima said, voice firm. "We'll be waiting in front of the hospital tonight. If you're in, meet me there." Kamino was fire and steel and shouting. It was chaos and smoke and rooftops lit by the glow of battle. Bakugo was surrounded, trapped, cornered by villains with masks and twisted ideals. There were too many. And for all his fire, he couldn't blast his way out of this. Midoriya turned to Kirishima, voice urgent. "You have to be the one to call out to him." Kirishima's breath caught. "Me? He won't listen to anyone else. It has to be you." There wasn't time to ask what this meant. Todoroki's quirk freezing a path in the air, Ida accelerating so fast the wind stung Kirishima's face. They were flying. No safety net, no backup, just seconds. Kirishima reached forward, arm stretched as far as it would go. His heart was hammering. "Bakugo, grab my hand!" Bakugo's head snapped toward the sound, towards him. Then Bakugo moved. No hesitation, no second guessing. He launched himself through the air and grabbed Kirishima's hand like it was the only solid thing in the world. Their fingers locked, and for the first time, they weren't fighting side by side. They were saving each other. They didn't speak until long after it was over, not until the dust had settled, the villains had scattered, and All Might's battle had come to an end. After everything, the group headed back to the dorms. The noise and crowds of the city were left behind, replaced by the quiet hum of late evening. Bakugo sat a few feet away from the group, arms over his knees, staring out at nothing in particular. Kirishima walked over and dropped down beside him. The dog sat between them. The lizard climbed up to perch on Kirishima's shoulder, his scales warm and solid against the side of his neck. They were quiet for a while. "You okay?" Kirishima asked, voice low. Bakugo didn't answer. Kirishima didn't push. After a while, Bakugo's voice broke the silence. "You came." "Of course I did." Bakugo turned his head. His eyes weren't angry, just tired, and maybe something else. "You didn't have to." "Yeah," Kirishima said. "I did." Bakugo looked at the dog, and then at the lizard, last at Kirishima. And then Bakugo leaned in and kissed him. Not cautious, not dramatic, just inevitable. Their lips met in the quiet. It wasn't soft, not really. It was a little rough around the edges, just like they were. It wasn't about fate. It wasn't about the soul animals. It was about the one person who showed up when it mattered. Kirishima kissed him back. Chapter 6. The day after Kamino. Kirishima stood in front of Bakugo's door, fidgeting with the hem of his hoodie. The hallway was quiet, early morning light just starting to filter through the windows of the dorms. Most of 1A was still asleep, too exhausted from everything that happened the night before to be up already. He wasn't even sure why he'd come out here. He hadn't planned anything. His brain had barely slept, let alone come up with a good way to handle this. The rescue, the kiss, everything that happened between them. It would have been easier to brush it off, to pretend it was just adrenaline or a weird soulmate fluke. But Kirishima knew better, knew Bakugo better. So he raised his hand and knocked. Bakugo opened the door half a second later, like he'd been standing on the other side the whole time. His hair was still wet from a shower. He looked tired, but not angry, not like usual. They stared at each other for a second before Kirishima spoke. I mean, he started, scratching the back of his neck. We already kissed and we're soulmates. So, like, Bakugo narrowed his eyes slightly. So, like, what? Kirishima shifted his weight, shoulders tense. So, like, do you want to be my boyfriend? The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just full of things neither of them knew how to say. Bakugo didn't roll his eyes, didn't blow anything up, just stepped back and muttered, "You're an idiot." Kirishima blinked, but then Bakugo jerked his head towards the room. "Get in here, dumbass." Kirishima grinned and stepped inside. Later that afternoon, the dorm common room was unusually full. People milled around, laughing, talking, sharing bits of what they remembered from Camino, and pretending the world wasn't still cracked open at its edges. Bakugo and Kirishima sat on the couch, not quite pressed together, but close enough that it wasn't subtle. Close enough that Kirishima's hand drifted over, just barely brushing Bakugo's fingers, before staying there, tangled, relaxed, easy. Kaminari caught sight of it first. "Wait, hold on, he said, nearly dropping his soda. "Are you guys dating?" Mina whipped around so fast her hair hit Kaminari in the face. "What? You're together?" Kirishima opened his mouth, probably to fumble through a half answer, but Bakugo beat him to it. "Obviously," he snapped, not even looking up. "He's my fucking soulmate." The room went silent for a beat too long. "Wait, like actual soulmate?" Kaminari asked. Bakugo glared. "No, metaphorical soulmate. Yes, actual soulmate, dunce face." Sero cut in without missing a beat. "Metaphorical went straight over your head, didn't it?" Mina squealed. "First of all, rude. Second of all, accurate, but still rude," Kaminari joked, clutching his chest. Kirishima hid his face in his hand, ears red and laughter muffled behind his palm. But he didn't pull away from Bakugo's hand. All right, friends, thank you for joining me for these next 2 chapters. We're going to have 2 more pieces left to go, chapters 7 and 8 and chapters 8 and 9. All right, so I hope you'll come back and join me for the next piece, and I will see you guys next time.